Dirigo Lab Speaker Series put on by the Central Maine Growth Council and hosted here at Thomas College. My name is Jeff Frank. I'm the program manager for Dirigo Labs. Welcome to our monthly speaker series. Tonight we'll be talking with Dr. Jeremy Qualls, Provost at Thomas College. And Dr. Qualls brings a rare and deep blend of STEM enterprise and higher education leadership with a background in physics, research administration, and education. Tonight we'll be talking a little bit about his background experience, the innovation entrepreneurship taking place here at Thomas College. And please help me welcome Dr. Jeremy Qualls. Thank you. Thank you for taking time and getting to chat here a little bit. And I wanted to start by talking about your background. There was a point I understand where you were going to take a different path into medicine, way back. And for some of the folks here tonight and watching online are at the age where they're going through college at Thomas College or elsewhere and starting to think about their path. Can you talk a little bit about what attracted you to medicine and then what ultimately allowed you or drove you toward research?
Sure. So a little background about me. I grew up in Tennessee. My father was the doctor. He was everyone. In fact, I was pretty much celebrity when I was born because I was famous for being the doc's kid. And so growing up through high school and all those years and even start of undergraduate, the intention was to take over his business. He had a private practice, and that was the ideal. But somewhere along the line, I found that I enjoyed being in the lab. I liked the research, and I was a biology major. I enjoyed the chemistry and the biology courses. But at the end of the day, I really enjoyed the physics and the engineering aspect and the problem solving. And then at the time, I had applied for both graduate school and for medical school, and I got into both. And then I was at the crossroads, and then it was working at the National High Magnetic Field Lab. It's a new national lab facility they'd opened in Florida, and I went and visited it, and it blew me away, the size and the scale of it. It's an R1 research facility, and then this is for me. And then I really enjoyed being able to be in that first cohort coming in to a new facility. And then everything else was pretty much history from there.
Yeah. It's amazing looking back at one instance or experience like that might have changed your path. And thinking about students out there making their decisions about their pathways. And coming from up here to Maine, as you've gotten to know this area and gotten to know Thomas College in Central Maine, how does it compare to where you grew up as a culture and for a small school like Thomas College as a spot for innovation and entrepreneurship?
Well, surprisingly, it's very familiar. It's very similar and familiar to me because it has a lot of rural characteristics that I grew up with. But that's my childhood Jeremy. The older Jeremy spent more time. I spent most of my career in California and in parts of Texas, and so. It's a big difference from the San Francisco Bay Area, but very similar to the Tennessee area I grew up in. And so for research and for innovation, it's more limited here than it was where I've come from just leaving from the Bay Area. In that case, it was a different environment. And so the things they had to offer there is you have more venture capitalists, you have more workforce, you just have a lot more funds in that area, so it's easier to do startups. In fact, many of the students at UC Berkeley and some of the area do startups while they're still in their undergraduate programs. Mm-hmm. And Maine's a little bit different. We're scrappy. There's fewer opportunities, and so you have to do a lot of the models more of a lean startup here. Research facilities is somewhat limited here. There's a few universities that have some of the higher end instrumentation and equipment, but the risk you run in Maine is that you overeducate many of your STEM researchers, and there's not a lot of jobs in this area. And so once you have your background, and especially in STEM, you leave. And so. Yep.
But yes, when I was growing up here in Maine, there was always this concept that you had to go elsewhere to find your fortune or to take fully potential of your degree, and more now. you're seeing people flood back to Maine with their experience. And can you walk a little bit through your career before Thomas College? You were at University of Southern Maine, and prior to that, out in California, the work you were doing, both in research and kind of the pathway.
Sure. So I actually started off as a heavy researcher. It's a little bit about me. So I had got to a point where I was publishing extensively, and then I got pneumonia, and then I was at a crossroads. My wife was at the hospital the same time I was, and then I realized this was not the path for me. So then I switched from R1 heavy research to being I went to away from private education to public, and then I taught many years at the University of Texas system. Mm-hmm. And then with time, I started to get more and more back into research. Almost I couldn't avoid it, and get back into grants. And then that's when I transitioned to California. And my background is in material science. I do a lot of synthesis and materials. And then during the process, I become interested in makerspaces and entrepreneurship. And one of the issues is that we have students who have dreams to make it big and start up companies, but they don't have the skills. And so what I began to do is think about what does it take to equip a student with the ability to take an ideal and then take it to fruition, to have like a company out of it, especially whether you're still an undergraduate. So that's where I started in kind of the entrepreneurship while I was in California. And then when I came out here, I have two brothers that live in Maine. And so I came here and started working at the University of Southern Maine in the role of the dean for the science, tech, and health. I eventually became a VP of research and did a lot of things that are not traditionally in a dean's role. Mm-hmm. But basically, I began to expand and looking at what does it take to do research. And then we expanded into a makerspace and looked at doing patents. And then for Maine, what does it look like to create a similar kind of infrastructure that's very successful in Boston or Maine or even now Nashville, Tennessee, in this area? And what does it look like? How do we help not only students but companies grow in this area?
I want to go back to something you mentioned around the mindset of students as it relates to entrepreneurship, as technology maybe, accepting the premise that technology has made it easier to start the companies, perhaps. What is it in the classroom that students can take from their education that can make them better to transition into startups or when you were out in California or in Nashville or here in Maine, what do you see about the character of students who succeed in taking that step into running a business?
That's a good question. So what I find is that there's a couple of key things, and it's not always disciplines or technically specific. It's very important for a student to have resilience. I think 90% of startups fail. And you have to get up and keep going. It's a process until you make it. So number one, you have to be resilient. You have to know why you're doing it, what's your mission, what's your purpose, and then you need to have a broad enough background so that you can figure out what you're going to do next. What if it doesn't work out? And then if you know what area background that you're leaning towards, you want to become an expert so that you can translate that knowledge to other fields. A lot of innovation comes from applying some skill set or knowledge you have in your discipline to another discipline. The soft skills are incredibly important. Being able to understand data, read data, those are very critical skills.
And it sounds that some of that takes place outside of the classroom. Can you talk a little bit about the types of experiential learning aspects that Thomas College offers, whether it's internships or taking those hard skills or classroom skills out into the real world before leaving?
Sure. We do it here, and I highly recommend any other place to do this as well, is to have that intern real life experience where you're doing it. You need to also have a connection, although it's not always apparent, with your faculty, so that they serve as a mentor outside the classroom. So that experience you have with the faculty, that guidance, that real world knowledge of how to do it, and then who to go to, like who to know, is just as important, I think, sometimes as what you learn in the classroom. So any kind of, you have a chance to do a co-op or internship, I highly recommend to do multiple of those.
Well, that's great. And with Thomas College having a student-to-teacher ratio that I think is highly competitive, around I think 14 to 1 or so, makes it a great opportunity for faculty to have that type of mentorship relationship. I'll say we at Dirigo Labs also try and help connect Thomas College students with some of our startup companies where it works well, both for the company and for the students to get that real-world experience. Can you talk a little bit about what entrepreneurship is looking like right now in the classroom? Are there certain areas in which students are better prepared or starting to take that step into generating ideas that they can develop?
Sure. So a couple things I've noticed is students have a misconception that an ideal is good enough to do the value of a single ideal. And so I have an ideal for a new fishing lure. It's going to make me millions of dollars. And then they say, well, how does it work? Well, it does this. And then I will say, well, how do you make it do that? And then the students usually say, I don't know, but if it does this, I'm a millionaire. So they already start off with a couple of issues. They don't have the technical skill set to actually make it do what they want. And then two is they don't have a full understanding of all it takes to go from an ideal to actually a successful company. And many of the students are good in nature, especially in Maine, and they have good intentions, and they think that they're optimistic. So that I think they believe that they'll be able to get the money to start it up. They believe that that people will invest, and it doesn't always go that way. So I think one thing that's really important for students to have is kind of an awareness of their own weaknesses, and then how to get the help to do the pieces that they don't have. So for the student who wants to make the thing wiggle, how do you get into touch with the engineer or the specialist to make it wiggle like you want it to?
What I really like about what you're saying is that you're mentioning things like the humility of self-awareness around your idea to understand your failures or vulnerabilities in your idea, and the maturity to understand what the steps are for the grit and resilience that you mentioned. It brings up about this richness around entrepreneurship, that it's not just the tech idea that's on Shark Tank and TV and that type of thing, but it's the wholeness of the person that they're bringing into a venture to make it thrive. And I think that's a great lesson because those skills come across throughout life, and it's a great testing bed for them, for an individual. That's a great theme to weave into education at Thomas. And now, can you tell me a little bit about your relatively new role as Provost?
Sure. So I started as Provost at Thomas in July of last year. So I transitioned in from the University of Southern Maine. And so one of my charges here is more is a broader, integrated look at how the programs interact with across the campus instead of just within one particular discipline. So instead of doing just arts, I do arts and sciences and business. It's the whole show. So it's been a treat. The faculty have been wonderful. The students have been great. I love the community at Thomas. It's a completely different vibe and feel than any other campus I've worked at. And so far I've enjoyed it a lot. There's optimism, but there's a lot of grit, and like I've heard it said that we're scrappy. I think it's true.
Yeah, it's a great skill, especially in startups, as everybody knows who's done with them. Being able to get a lot out of a little, and that resourcefulness is good to learn anyway. What's new? What's taking place at Thomas College that you'd like to share with folks?
Sure. So we've been known for our business programs and some criminal justice. We got into education about 9 years ago, and that's thriving. We've got a new co-op program with that. On the business side, what I'm doing is looking, how does it interact more with entrepreneurship? How do you bring in the issues that I've seen in the past where we have students that come with great innovative ideas, but then what do you do with it, right? How do you actually create it? If it's a software program, how do you code that? How do you get that to market? Currently, there's not an infrastructure to do that at most campuses in the United States, unless you're a specialized program that has a large entrepreneurship, like a launch or incubator. You don't have support for students to create and launch ideas. You have the ideation part, where you can vet it. That's pretty common, very similar to like a Shark Tank ideal, where you can talk about the ideal, but there's not a mechanism to take that to reality. So building off of that, I want to couple with Thomas College's foray into the STEM fields. So I don't know if you saw in the news, we were lucky to get funding to build out additional labs. And so now, as more and more of our STEM labs come online, I'd like to look at more of the technical support. Can we offer more degrees in the STEM? Can we offer the almost engineering science capabilities to do these, either programming or product development? And I'd like to take some of the experiences I've learned working with prototyping with Maine Health to have that kind of experience here for our students, so that our entrepreneurship is now reinforced by technical support. And so,
can you tell me about the labs? Specifically, what they'll be hosting?
So we've got. I'm not sure what all instrumentation we'll get, but we'll have a biochemistry lab and a physics lab, and I'm hoping that we can throw in there a forensics lab as well. And then long term, I'd love to have a robotics arena here. I would love to put in and have Thomas host kind of a coliseum for robotics and esports for the state. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's something I'd love to see manage.
A good segue into something I want to touch on this year. The other hat you wear, can you tell us about that?
Sure. So in addition to being a provost, I'm also the director for the Maine Space Grant Consortium. And so this is a NASA position where I help oversee the growth of STEM aligned with NASA for the state. And it's more of a higher visioning role where I work with an executive board and affiliates across the state to promote growth. And so that's primarily in the STEM fields, but it could be other ones. And then I work with the Maine Space Corporation and a number of other entities to try to see what can we do to increase the visibility of space-aligned research, manufacturing, and industry for the state.
Interesting. And can you give me for instance of what that looks like this year or last year for the type of
Sure. So one of the things that we do is we help award the NASA EPSCoR dollars, and so those funds they go to a state to help increase research capability. And so this particular year it went to Andrew Neal's in the Rue Institute, and so he's at Brunswick Landing, and they're opening up a new cold sputtering lab. And that lab, what they do is it's a new additive manufacturing technique where you use metal and you sandblast to grow it out. And so you can get like 2 or 3 inch size pieces of metal, but it allows you to get to places where you normally couldn't weld. And that one goes in for manufacturing, and it's helping defense companies. And so what my role is basically be a consultant and to help kind of envision how the pieces fit and as a connector.
That's an interesting way of, there's a proactive aspect of that type of entrepreneurship when it translates also into the post-secondary space, because you have corporations or frontier manufacturers saying, this is what we need. If people can come up with these ideas, we're ready to support them. That's a great way to integrate what's happening in STEM and through NASA. Is any of those dollars funded anywhere? I guess some is going to Rue. Are there any projects you're looking forward to in 2026?
Well, the Maine Space Grant Consortium has funds that they give out to any of the affiliates, and that supports research, internships. The affiliate member at Thomas College is Luke Shorty, and then he put in a call that picked up 2 seed grants for faculty here. So it's many of the campuses in the state of Maine benefit from the funds, and so. And then my ideal is to try to get more folks putting in grants, more STEM centers, more of the pipeline. So many of the kids, they lose their interest around 7th and 8th grade into science and math. And so we'd like to keep that going. The other thing I'd like to see is more patents coming out of the state of Maine. There's very few that come out of here. We just really aren't at that point yet where we're generating The bio life sciences is doing pretty good, but outside of that, there's a shortage of patents that are coming out of the state.
Can you explain the STEM centers that you mentioned? What defines a STEM center?
A STEM center is a nexus where the resources are pulled together with a mission or goal to advance in one of the science, technology, engineering, or math. And their focus are those subset of grants, usually federal dollars, as opposed to a center that focuses on policy, like the Cutler Institute.
I see. Okay. And with the new labs being built here at Thomas, those are available for the core curriculum for the actual coursework. Are they available for student entrepreneurs as well?
That's an awesome idea. So right now the setup is that one of the labs is for doing kind of student projects and research. Ultimately, you need something that's a larger space that allows for breakout space and then prototyping. Our labs are more along biochemical, cell culturing, and life sciences. So ultimately, when the students come through, their ideals are very seldomly in that area. Many times they're a widget or a software app.
Okay.
And so those are the kinds of ones that I would be looking to strengthen.
Oh, exciting. Is there anything else you'd like to focus on or share about what's going on at your vision for this coming year, for this semester?
Well, I still struggle with the role of AI. I've seen many advances, especially in higher education, where it makes me question what's the role of AI in the classroom. I'm not sure what that is yet. I've seen AI be able to solve most homework problems. If you just take a picture of it and ask it to solve it, it solves it for you.
Yeah. So
for me, I want to think about what does the modern student need to survive in this new environment, and I believe a lot of it is to be an integrator between, have a background and to integrate between those that have a really depth of knowledge to those that are just getting into it because maybe AI brought them there.
I see.
So I've said this before, like I can use AI to fix my washer and dryer just by putting in the symptom and then what instrument it is. And then they'll pull up and get a YouTube video that shows me exactly how to take apart and order the piece and fix it. But there's not that person to integrate it when it doesn't quite work out right or how to get to that point. And so there's those kind of things. And then the businesses are going to rapidly change, and there's going to be a new generation that we don't know what it looks like yet, where they focus on that integration. And so at the moment, what I'm looking at is how do we increase academic excellence, which I'm already very proud of what Thomas is doing. How can we do that? How can we work with industry to see what their needs are? And then also kickstart entrepreneurship so that students have a chance to fail before they get into their life post-college. So most of your startup companies, if you've failed already once, it's 2 to 3 times more likely to succeed the second time. So I'd rather have them come in and try something and fail while they're students, so that just that experience alone of failing gives you set up for your next career.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
Almost every company that I've seen that's worked the founders have failed at a couple other things in the past, and it's really that resilience to learn from your failure and improve that makes them successful the next time. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on campus with the use of AI and how classrooms or faculty members are adapting? Because it is I don't want to say a threat, but it can be an additive, it can be taken away, but it's undeniable in either form that it's something that has to be addressed and kept up with.
Sure. So the AI looks different with every professor. So the faculty has control over their classroom and how they deliver the content and how they want to use AI. So and because of that, you'll have a variance in the ones that dig in, use it a lot, and the ones that use it a little. But our goal is that every student has access and knowledge of this AI tool. Whether they don't get it in one class, maybe they get it in another one. And in some cases, it's specifically designing assignments that has more of you in it. And it talks about your experiences or has more of that integration. it also has clear guidelines of what's acceptable and what isn't. I think many of the students can determine that line between, what's too much AI and what's not. If you tell them up front, you can say, okay, you can use AI for doing this, but don't use AI for that. And I think that is about as good as you're going to get. And because if you don't have faith in the student, what happens is it creates an environment of mistrust. So the student's going to claim, no matter what, oh, you think you're mad at me because you think that AI did this, but I did it. And so you don't want to be in the situation where you're separating or breaking that relationship between the faculty and the student. So I think clear guidelines of what's acceptable, and then building the curriculum around the understanding that this tool is accessible, and you don't want to put a student in a situation where that they use it and don't tell you about it and they depend on it. Because if you use the AI, it inhibits your ability to create the pathway to understand it yourself.
It sounds like for students to understand whatever it is the AI is coming up with, necessarily how it was produced, and as a function of the process behind, whether it's LLMs or other, so that they can understand that it's not just the end result, or that it must be correct if it's coming from this AI agent. Yeah.
But as a disclaimer, in the future, it may be just a point where you can say to the AI, well, now explain it to me. And give me 3 or 4 more examples to help me get there. I don't quite understand this point. I can see a time coming where the AI can be a very good instructor, but I don't see a point coming where it helps you integrate with people and build that resiliency, maybe a little, but it doesn't help you, train you to have those experiences that I think we often take for granted.
Well, the conversation and the focus on the student from either the perspective of faculty, it certainly highlights that it heightens the maybe attenuation around faculty focusing on students and students being forced to maybe justify their work or explain their relationship with AI in the work that they're doing.
I'm also afraid that it's going to lead to single answers, so that everyone has a very similar answer and kind of a unification of approach instead of a diversity of different answers or styles.
Yep.
And so
that makes a lot of sense. And that can be now across curriculum, where in the hard sciences you do have more often than not, a firm yes or no type of answer, as more in the soft sciences. That you might have more creativity space.
But one of the things that we keep thinking about is how we are going to use AI, and we're not yet at the point of realizing what AI is going to use AI for. Mm-hmm. So many of the uses of AI right now is because we thought of it and we're using it as a tool, but it doesn't mean that AI itself won't create its own tools that are superior to what we even had imagining. So at some point, I think it's almost looking at a crystal ball. You don't know what the future is going to hold.
It's moving fast. And the students are at the front end of it, for sure, as they're diving into it and learning at the frontier of this new technology. And it's fascinating to watch from outside, from Dirigo Labs, being a partner with Thomas College, and I'm sure it's keeping you very focused on front of everything. Are there any questions from folks you'd like to open up? Kim?
Jeremy, I actually have a couple questions, but you mentioned the different states that you've been in and different schools, and you mentioned that the culture here is different than anywhere else that you've ever worked. And I wondered, what's the significant difference? And if it's something we're lacking, how are you going to fix it?
It's not an easy fix if you're trying to simulate or emulate what they've done. We're a different creature. I think instead of trying to be like them, you have to figure out what your strengths are and play to it. There's no way you can get the capital or the venture, any of the investment or infrastructure that's in the Bay Area. That will never happen in Maine, I don't think. Knock on wood. I just don't see it happening unless there's a significant transformation that happens. And so how do you make it happen? Well, first off, the population of Maine is only 1.3 million, right? You can grab that in many of your city areas in California. So what you're looking at is playing to our strengths in agriculture. You play to our strengths in tourism. You play to our strengths of being right on the ocean. Right? So there's certain things that you can play to. The students here have a lot of resiliency. They also have kind of a good nature that allows, I think, to build more trust. So many of the students here I trust working with more than some of my other students that I've worked with in other states, in the sense that I don't think they would sell me out as easy here. I think they would actually stay in the project and work and see it to its end. I have worked with students before that I've said, all right, if there was a payoff of $500,000, would you sell it off? And then they would probably, sure, I'm cashing in. I don't see Maine students doing that. I have a lot of respect for their integrity. So some of the things I think should happen I think the Waterville area is perfect for creating another hub. I think you need to have multiple hubs and then link them across the state. If you go from Bangor to Portland, there's a little bit, but not a lot. And so Colby is building a new science center there, and they've got a lot of investment into a data center. KVCC has a lot with the tech and CTE kind of themed line. And I think Thomas can support a lot with the business and then also the integration with technology. So I think with these, and then we've also have a corporate campus model where we're looking at how to bring in more resources to work with people like Dirigo Labs and to work with other groups to try to create a centralized hub in Maine. So that's where I would start. I would look for trying to get more money redirected. I know it's sad and you may not like this, but some of the common players to some of the emerging fields, and see if we can build out more resources in this area. That's how I would do it.
I love that. For those who are interested in entrepreneurship, giving them a place to go, to be around other folks and let their ideas thrive. It's a great hub model. And as Central Maine, we have a great space for between the coast and the mountains, between Bangor and Portland. We really are a space where folks can come together for all of that. Any other questions? Move it all.
Yeah. So you said you spent a lot of time in different places, including the Bay Area. And we know the reasons why people will flock to the Bay Area to, show their invention to the world, get investment or whatever. Based on what you've just spoken about, what Maine's advantages can be played on, what do you envision additionally, like very specific concrete things that could happen that would invite people to come here? What specific incentives would do that?
There's a couple of them, and probably in the order that I would see it happening is more of the life sciences. They've got a momentum right now. So there's like a little string of pearls that go along the coastline of different labs and research along, basically life sciences. I see them growing first. Hopefully you'll see more medical research and incubators. The state's investing more in that area, so I can see that growing. At the same time, there's an initiative to have a spaceport and manufacturing brought back in the area. So having manufacturing or advances in technology, I can see that is probably an area that's untapped, because that gives you the infrastructure for launching startups and doing manufacturing in Maine. The other third thing is our role in the data science. We have a lot of expertise in the state on doing various aspects of data science and data analytics. So those are areas. And then Maine has had a lot of luck with agriculture and forestry. So there's that area as well. There's a number of products that we can still do in the ag market. As far as the tech sector, I'd put my money either in the life sciences or emerging around manufacturing, because we have strong ties with defense in Maine, and the capabilities that we have, the actual infrastructure here. We just don't have a lot of startups around that utilize them. And a lot of the work that we're getting from our manufacturing is out of state, coming in for them making parts for people out of state. But there's no reason why we couldn't have lean startups that have products being created and designed out of Maine. So
I have a question about the F-score funding and the pace of technological change. It feels like, if not empirically so, that it's speeding up. And when you're looking for MEPS4 dollars in a space like space, that takes a long timeline for a lot of infrastructure investment, oftentimes in the manufacturing space. How do you project where dollars should be going if the result of those dollars may not be, for several years, and anticipating the rapid pace of change? Is there a framework?
Well, I think there's more demand right now in the state than there's funds to support it. There was a recent call by MTI that went out, and I believe there's over $120 million worth of requests for a fraction of that money from the state. NSF has engine programs, and so does NASA and DOE. So there's some of these large multi-state grants that can help build the infrastructure. They're usually around $100 million. Those can get you started, but you've got to keep it going. Maine has a tradition of creating sandcastles. So you invest heavily into something, you stand it up, and then it has no sustainability, and then with time it just goes away. And
is that because there hasn't been an industry built underneath it with workers and communities that depend on that?
That's correct. And you don't have, this is a different game. The population is small here. Sometimes you're only one expert in. You lose your expert, and then what do? You're struggling. And even in the universities, you may only have one person in that field. And that person is doing fundamental research, not necessarily applied research. And when that individual leaves, you now have a hole for the state.
Well, I don't want to sound like but I will say Central Maine has housing is often a limiting factor for industry and workers and labor force restrictions along the coast. In southern Maine, Central Maine, as by comparison, has an advantage of having
yes,
relatively cheaper home housing. So
it's very expensive in Portland.
It's here to grow. Any other questions?
Do you think the next step for us is just like to walk, going back to the AI, to walk students into using it as a tool for critical thinking? I mean, still AI is not to teach them how to do critical thinking and ask the good questions. So do you see it as this is our next role?
I think right now you're only seeing one face of AI. And the AI you see today is not the AI in 5 years from now. And so what your probably mindset is wrapping around, how do we use this AI? But it's not going to be that thing in 5 years from now. In 5 years from now, it may be at the point where it's having a conversation with you just like I am now. And so in that case, it may be your go-to for comfort. It may be it's like your personal consultant, right? And you may even have a subscription fee that keeps people from sharing. It may even be legally so that it's like you have protection that you might have with a lawyer, a psychologist, right? It may be a protected content where you're interacting with it, and it's your casual best friend and does 5 or 6 jobs for you. And I don't know what it's going to look like in 5 years from now. But to get there, students need to begin to understand what it can do, and then the morality of what you should be doing with it. Traditionally, technology and our humanity to deal with that technology is usually a little bit back and forth, like a seesaw. But right now, I believe it's swung too far the other way. I don't think the technological advances that we have today we're not ready for it already. And we're not even seeing the damages it does, even for screen time, which isn't in the AI, until even recently are we seeing the damages from this. So I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years with AI, but our students need to be prepared, they need to be familiar, and then they need to kind of walk with it. So as it evolves, they need to learn to change with it and to understand kind of their role. And when can I use AI and when should I not? Because you could probably use it to do things, that are dubious. I can think I could create a lot of scam websites pretty quick. And sell things that don't exist to people really easy. So,
reminds me of an E.O. Wilson quote about that we have Neolithic minds and medieval institutions and godlike technology, and it's this delta between what we're capable of handling as emotional Neolithic brains. Yeah. Around that, and you don't have to answer, but are there, from the lens of looking at college students interact with AI, would there be regulatory recommendations you would make, even if they could only be implemented within your own domain here, Tom?
Well, I'm watching carefully what happens in Australia, where they if you have to be at least 16, I believe, to be on social media. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out and whether it's a positive or a good thing. If it is, then I would start restricting that. I know at the early stages of AI has gotten in trouble where it's made recommendations to students or to the users that wasn't appropriate. I think eventually that'll be sorted out. But my recommendation is there should be already, at this point, there should already be legality around it of who's using it, what data is being collected, and how it's interacting, and how much access does it have to my actual personality, me, my questions, my thoughts, my concerns.
It is a little bit of a Wild West, it seems, yeah, as our regulations catch up. Hopefully we'll catch up.
Yeah, I don't know would we have AI personhood, right? I don't know the legalities of that.
Well, we have corporate.
Yeah.
The corporation making the AI has personhood in our own. Any other questions there? Any other topics we'd like to cover?
No, I would just like to say that Thomas is going through a lot of changes. We have a wonderful community. We're looking for partners. We're looking for people in the Waterville area that would like to work with us and to think big. We want to be part of the game, continue to be part of the game, especially in entrepreneurship. And then as we build out our technical capabilities and then our programs, we would love to work with anyone in Central Maine.
Well, it's very exciting to see everything taking place here at Thomas College. It has been on an upward trajectory for decades as I've been here in Maine, and I'm excited to see the new labs and continuing the partnership with Dirigo Labs. Thank you very much.